The UI saga draws to a close. Let's get to work. Happy nearly New Year, people. It's MisterToolbox back with another Amazon Lumberyard video. We've taken a look at and broken things that other people have made for long enough. So today, let's create our own UIs. We're going to make a basic HUD overlay that'll just have a health counter on it. And we'll also make something in the 3D world. So we'll build a canvas, place it on an object in the world. Let's get started. I'll be using the samples project for this. I was in the feature test project last time, so I'm going to jump into project configurator, click samples project, and set as default that song and dance. Asset processor springs to life. We know we're good to go. Close this up. As is tradition, I've opened up the editor. I'm going to go ahead and click open level. And then in the getting started files folder, we're going to select the getting started completed level. Click open and let that load. I'm going to use this level just because it's already got the player controller. It's got an environment already built, so we can just tack on our pieces without having to deal with building all the rest of this just to show off the UI. First things first, let's fire up the UI editor. We'll find that under View, Open View Pane, UI Editor. Make a new canvas by clicking File, New Canvas. We're ready to go. This is going to be a pretty basic HUD. I really just want an image with some text overlaid on it, shove it in the corner, put some transparency on it, and we'll call it good. So first thing we'll do is right-click out on the canvas, over New, hover over Element from Prefab, and we'll grab an image. White's fine, so let's dock that to the bottom left corner of the screen. To do that, we'll come to this first column. On the third row here, we'll click that. We'll see it shoot down. Let's make it a little bit smaller. That's a little too big for me. So we'll come down to scale over on the properties of our image. We'll whack the Y down to 0.5. And then down under image where we've got the alpha line that sets the alpha transparency, let's notch that down to 0.25 as well. There, we've got a border, but the image itself is nice and transparent. With the image out of the way, let's nest a child text element under that. So I'm going to right click on image over in our hierarchy, hover over new, hover over element from prefab, and we'll select text. Let's make some edits to this text element. First thing, for my own sanity, I'm going to double click the name text and I'm going to rename it to txt-health, just so I know what it is. Over under the text dropdown in its properties, I'm going to change the text field to read 10. Leave the font path as Vera, but we will change the size. Let's say 72. That should be big. That's pretty good. That'll work. Cool. So that's it. We're done with the UI. I never promised it would be pretty. So let's go ahead and save it. We'll click File, Save Canvas As. We'll name this guy in MisterToolbox fashion, awesome_HUD. Go ahead and click Save. It's in the UI Canvases directory. That's where we want it. And we're good to move on. All right, I'm in a traditional mood, so we're going to do something I've done in a ton of videos. That is some terrain painting. So jump over in the roll-up bar to the Terrain Editing tab. Click Layer Painter. Select a nice bright red. Click OK. I'm just going to paint off to the left of the street, right over here. I've turned to the left from the player start. You can't paint the street because it's an actual entity, but as long as we kind of know where we're aiming, that'll work. With our terrain painted, let's grab a proximity trigger and we'll place it kind of in that general area. In the roll-up bar, we'll go back to the objects. We'll click Entity. Expand triggers, find proximity trigger, and we'll drag it out into the perspective view. You don't have to be precise about this, but let's place it sort of adjacent there. And then we'll alter the dim Y. We'll set it to say 14. That should cover the street. That looks pretty good. Next, we're going to create a component entity. We'll need the entity outliner to do this, so if you don't have it visible, I've got mine over here docked on the left. If you don't have it visible, click View, open View pane, find the entity outliner, click it, find somewhere for it to live. Once it exists, we can right-click out in the outliner and click Create Component Entity. Just going to name it something silly. Mine's Entity 189, so I'm going to rename it to, let's say, Hud underscore Entity. Press Enter. We'll see the name's changed over here. Next thing we want to do is right-click it, come down to Flow Graph, and click Add. It's going to ask me for a name, so I'll call it Hud underscore Entity underscore FG for Flow Graph. This doesn't really matter. We'll be able to find it well enough. Click OK. And we'll pop right in. I'm going to slide the flow graph out of the way for a second. You may have noticed when I renamed this HUD entity, I did so in the Entity Inspector. You probably won't have that on screen, so it's the same process. We'll click View, open View pane, come down to Entity Inspector, give it a click. I've got mine docked over here on the right. While we're here, I do want to add a component here, so we'll click Add Component. This is with HUD entity selected in the Entity Outliner. Come down to UI, and we'll click UI Canvas Asset Ref. Once that's down here in our inspector, we'll click the triple dots to the right of Canvas Path Name. Make sure we're in UI Canvases where we saved our canvas. We'll select Awesome underscore HUD. Click Open. We'll see it's populated here. And we'll also click Load Automatically so that it loads when the game starts. Before we drag the flow graph back on screen, I want to make sure I have the proximity trigger selected. The reason for that will be pretty evident in a second here. So hover over the little T, give it a click, then I can bring flow graph back into view. Let me resize this window right quick. Try to move it without docking it somewhere. Cool. Since I never closed it, it's got the HUD underscore entity FG already selected. If you did have to close this window, just make sure when you reopen it, down here in the lower left-hand corner, you expand level, components, HUD entity, and you get that flow graph. Once we're here, we can right-click out in the flow graph area and click Add Selected Entity. We'll need that proximity trigger. I'm going to throw some nodes in here. Once I'm done, we'll go through what we're doing. Alright, there are more elegant ways to do this, but this will get our point across. We're going to start with that proximity trigger we created in the level. When the player enters that, we'll fire from here into UIE text get text. What that's going to do is get whatever the value of the text field txt-health is. That's that text field we created in the UI editor. And that's assigned to the graph entity. In this case, the graph entity is our HUD entity component entity we created. And that's got that canvas asset ref, which will let it know how to get back to the canvas we're dealing with. So once it gets that value, which defaults to 10, it'll spit that out into math sub, into both the activate and the A pins. What that'll do then is subtract B from A. B in our case is 1, so it's going to decrement our health by 1, and then pump that new value out into math round. We're going to do that because the math sub function will return a float by default. That's going to have a 0.00000 kind of tacked to the end. It's going to make our UI ugly. So let's get the integer back, and we'll do that by just rounding it off. That new rounded off value is then going to come into a math less function. What that's going to do is send to the activate and to the A pin, just like before. We're going to check to see if our new health value is less than 1. If it is less than 1, we'll come down here to UI text set text, and we're going to set the text on that text health field in our HUD to the value dead to let us know we're dead. If it's false, however, that means we still have health left. So what we want to do is activate set text from this math less, but get the value back from math round. So that'll spit out our new health value into the set text, activate from math less, And we should see on screen our health decrement by 1 every time we enter this proximity trigger. So let's give it a go. Alright, I closed flow graph, so I'm going to click out in the perspective view, press Ctrl G to enter game mode. See, we have our nice alpha transparent 10 kind of hanging out in the corner. Let's drive over to our red area. You see our health went down to 9. Let's back through it again. 8. It looks like it's working. 7. 6. Let's keep going down until we get to 1, and that's where the magic should happen. Alright, so next time we roll through, we should see the word dead instead of a 0. Sure enough, we do. So let's roll through one more time just to see what happens. Nothing. Nothing's happening because you can't subtract 1 from the word dead. I'm sure if we had the console up, it would be screaming at us right now. But that shows our HUD in action. So just to cover off our HUD, some things to note are that 1, anything you don't cover with stuff in a UI canvas is transparent by default. So we shoved that image down in the left corner, but the rest of the screen was blank, and that shows as we're playing our game. 2, you can set alpha transparency on individual objects so we can kind of see through the HUD as we've built it. And that 3, you can interact with those objects either in flow graph or in script or code to make that stuff dynamic. Now our example was ugly, but it functioned, and that could have been lava. I mean, it's the world's worst lava, but lava nonetheless. You can figure out a way to then kind of build some game logic around your health or God only knows what, but good example here. For the UI in the 3D world, I want to steal one asset out of the feature test project. So to do so, I'm going to jump in Windows Explorer into Dev, Feature Tests, go to Objects, Primitives, and I'm going to grab the plane_001.cgf. So we'll copy that. Jump back to Samples project. We'll see that same folder structure. So we'll jump into Objects, Primitives, and let's post that plane_001.cgf in there. With that out of the way, we can close Windows Explorer, jump back into the UI editor. View, open View pane, UI editor. I always make a new canvas. I know you don't have to. It starts with one, but it just makes me feel better. What we're going to do here is right-click out in the canvas, hover over New, Element from Prefab, and we will grab... Let's grab an image first. I want this thing to be centered, so we're going to click in the second column, second row, the center anchor. And then from there, let's shrink all of these anchors down to say 33%. Oh shoot, not these last two. Sorry about that. These need to be at 67. Cool, so we have a centered sort of gigantic image on this UI. White's not going to do for this one, so let's go ahead and click color down under the image property. We'll do red, nice garish red. Close that up. Once we've got that, I'm going to right click on image in our hierarchy, hover over new, element from prefab, and plop a text on top of it. I want this text to be huge, so I'm going to come under text in the properties, and select the font size, and we'll crank that up to 72, which is the max. We'll also change the color to, let's say, stark white. It'll be easier to read. And then last, let's set the text to 10. Once that's done, click out anywhere in the transparent area on the canvas. What we need to do is make sure we select Render to Texture. When we do that, you'll see we get a render target. I'm going to call this $health_billboard. Just seems to be a convention that all these render targets start with the $. I'm not one to buck that, so I will leave it just like that. Click File, Save Canvas As. Make sure we're in UI Canvases, and we'll call this Health Billboard. Click Save. So this thing's now going to render out to a texture, which is half the battle. We need it on a material. So let's close the UI editor. We're going to open the material editor. View, open view pane, material editor. What we need to do is right click over here in the hierarchy, and we're going to add a new material. It samples project materials. That's good enough. We'll call this health_billboard just to be consistent. Click save. And now we're staring at the replace me texture, so let's replace it. First off, under material settings, come down to surface type. Let's set that to invulnerable. Under opacity settings, let's crank the alpha test up to say 2. Then over here on the right on texture maps, let's expand diffuse. Those all look good, but we do need a name. So what we'll do is put in our $, health_billboard. That should do it for this. You'll see it go black. Don't worry, that's okay. We can close the material editor now. Back out in the perspective view, we're going to create a new component entity. I'll create mine, say off in the grass. We'll put it right here-ish. We'll right click in the perspective view. Create new component entity. Entity 190, super helpful. No, you will be billboard. Okay, with that set, we can start adding our components. First up, we need a canvas asset ref, so we'll click add component. Come to UI, UI canvas asset ref. Click the triple dots to the canvas path name, and we will find our health billboard. Click open. Again, we'll load that automatically. That should do it. After that, we need to give this sucker some physics. So we'll come down to physics, choose physics. Under behavior in the properties here, I need to expand this over just a bit. We're going to click the plus, click the drop down and set this to static body. Looks good. Come back up to add components, into physics, colliders. We'll set a mesh collider on it. When you add the mesh collider, you'll get the static mesh for free, so it'll save us some clicks. What we'll do is click the triple dots to the right of static asset, and we're going to grab that plane that we stole from the feature tests. You'll see it's rotated kind of flat right now. We'll need to deal with that in a minute. But we'll click open. And then the material override. That is where we need to we click the triple dots here. Come back up. Up again. Materials. Health_billboard.mtl. One last component we need is in UI. It's the UI canvas on mesh. You can leave the render target override blank. We just need that there. You may have seen it appear as I was working, but we've got this thing sitting on the ground now. So let's kind of move it into place. Select it if I can. Wow, first shot. Okay. We'll grab it, we'll move it up. Jump into rotate and rotate it, say 90 degrees. And then if I can see which way it's facing, looks like we got to rotate it 180 degrees this way as well. Last but not least, we'll jump into the scale tool and we'll make this sucker big enough to see at least. Come on, there we go. So we've got our giant hideous 10 floating around. Cool. If we jump into game mode, we should be able to see it. There it is. There is our UI in the 3D world. Let's make it do something. You can probably guess where we're going with this. We're going to right click on the billboard, come to flow graph, click add. We'll name this, unsurprisingly, billboard_FG. Click OK. Get flow graph out of the way for a minute. Come back into the perspective view, select our proximity trigger. Flow graph back in, resize because 4K hates me, and drop that entity in. I'm going to go ahead and plop down the rest of our nodes. I'll be right back. Yes, I lifted these wholesale out of the other flow graph, but they'll do the job. Let's close up the flow graph. We'll jump into game mode. Here we go. Our HUD went down, but our billboard did not. And immediately I know why that is. We have a different name for the text element on our billboard UI, so we need to go ahead and change that. Escape out of game mode, come into view, open view pane, UI editor, file, open canvas, grab our health billboard, click open, double click the name of the text element, and let's rename that txt-health. Give that a save, and we should be good to try again. Let's go for it. Hey, it went to 9, and 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and dead. An interactive UI in our 3D world. So yeah, you can see how important it is that we get the element name and the get text and the set text flow graph nodes right. Otherwise it won't know what to update, and that's what we were seeing before. Now, like many things Lumberyard, that may seem fairly complicated to get a UI into the 3D world. The nice thing about it is that it's the same for every time you do this. So it's kind of one workflow, you learn it, and it's always the same. It's very repeatable. Doesn't matter what the shape of the static mesh is, what's on your UI, you're always doing the same steps. So if you can get those in your head, you're good to go for adding UI overload to your level if you wanted to. All right, I'm going to call it a wrap here. Looks like I got about 13 minutes left. I will see all of you next year. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, do all that cool stuff. Get your friends involved. We need more people using Lumberyard. Don't forget to join the Lumberyard Slack community. We've got it. It's growing. I love the conversation going on, especially lately. It seems to be picking up every day. Do jump in, join us, have some fun, learn some stuff, and I'll see you guys next year. Bye.